All right, good morning. Today I'm going to talk about more the usage side of data, especially in a marketing lens. We've actually talked about some of the technologies I'll cover, so I'll slide briefly over those and get more into marketing recommendations in this presentation. To set this up, in 2014, we've been talking about big data for a while. In 2014, it was at the peak of the hype curve. We just saw another hype curve from Raghav. And by 2015, it's mysteriously missing. I promise you, this is an eye chart. It's actually not there. So big data has fallen off the Gartner hype curve. And when interviewed, Betsy Burton, who's the woman who actually puts together this report, says what's happening is that big data has quickly moved over the peak of inflated expectations and become prevalent in our lives. I would not consider big data to be an emerging technology anymore. So with that said, we're going to assume that big data, ubiquitous. Now, how do we use this data? And specifically to marketing, what is the holy grail of marketing? It, at this point, is personalization. This is a chart from Sailthrough, and they estimate that when you move from omni-channel optimized marketing to actually personalized predictive algorithms, you can see a 20% lift in customer expected lifetime value. That's a big deal. But it also comes with a big risk. And this is the risk that Matt Seven was talking about the other day of creeping the customer out. So I want to talk about 3 technologies quickly. Some of them we've already covered in some of these discussions that are actually increasing this data set even more and becoming hyper-personalized. And then I want to focus mostly on how do you gauge where that line is between being personalized and actually just being big brother with the consumer. So the 3 technologies I focused on in this project were trackers, which this includes things like the Allstate DriveWise. You actually plug this into your car. And so now Allstate knows not only how you use your car, how you drive, but where you are at all times. The marketing implications here are probably pretty obvious. So they can find lookalikes actually based on your driving style, how risky you are, or how cautious you are. They know the make and model of your car from this computer system. They also know where you are at all times. So think about the pushed marketing that could come from this. And they've actually started doing this. Raghav just gave us a great presentation about beacons, so I'm really not going to talk about the technology too much. But there are stores that are already testing this out. Target's a good example of that. And Raghav mentioned this. You need to get the consumer to turn their Bluetooth on. So what you have to do is kind of give something to the consumer to let them use this technology. The way Target does this is you can go into a special app in some of their stores. You can put your whole shopping list in there. And they will tell you when you walk into the store, they'll reorganize it in the most efficient way to walk through a Target store based on where those products are. And when you walk to a certain sector of the store and there's something on your list that's near you, it will put a little notification. And through that, they can also learn where the customers are at all times. And then finally, connected appliances, which Rob talked about earlier this week. This is the same exact product he was talking about, the Samsung Smart Hub. I want to extend what he was saying a little bit more to maybe a couple years down the road if appliances like this become ubiquitous. Think about what can happen when you plug it into cloud analytics. So this particular refrigerator has cameras in it. You plug that into a cloud service that can recognize labels, that can read expiration dates, that can actually see the progress of a bottle of ketchup depleting over time. And you could do a couple things with it. You could have Heinz, who maybe is the maker of the ketchup in your fridge, start an auto replenishment program that makes buying Heinz very sticky, pun intended. Or you could push something to Hunt's, and when they see that you're running low on Heinz, Hunt's pushes you a coupon to try to get you to switch if you tend to be a more price-sensitive customer. So we have even more data coming as marketers coming under into our little hands, and it's even more personalized. It's about how we actually use the devices in our house. It's about where we are over time. So with this, the spandex rule that we all know and love comes into play. Just because you have all this data as a marketer does not mean that you should use all this data, or does not mean that you should use it at all times. No one wants to see the metaphorical nerd in the spandex suit as you're marketing. So I have four recommendations for marketers as they start to come into touch with all of these personalized data sets and time-specific data sets. The first one is to respect and listen to the customer. So what I mean by this is, first you want to pick your metric, and this is just business sense. Are you going to measure Net Promoter Score? Are you going to measure sales? That's up to you, and that's up to your organization. But when you do pick that metric, you need to really internalize using that and monitoring it at all times, because this is going to be your own early warning sign that you may be alienating the customer. it's really hard to identify this creepy bar, what is a big brother action for everyone, because just like you segment consumers on so many different things, different consumers have different tolerances for what they consider intrusive marketing behavior. So you want to pick this metric. You want to use this metric to help segment your market. Do you have a certain subset of consumers that are actually more okay with you knowing their location because they see the benefit in it and they don't worry about the privacy concerns? And you probably have others that don't. So you want to monitor that just like you monitor any other segmentation data. And then ultimately your goal should not necessarily be to personalize for personalization's sake. It should be to be the most relevant to the consumer. Just because you know where a consumer is, if that's not actually relevant to your marketing goals, don't use it. It's not relevant. You turn people off with your marketing, the research has shown, if the marketing is not relevant or if they find it creepy. Going along with this, the second recommendation is to constantly be testing. So you segment your data, you pick your metrics. It's a really a good practice to have a continuous control group. And you can monitor changes in your Net Promoter Score, changes in your lift over time when you try any of these new personalization tactics. Sometimes they're going to increase lift. Sometimes they'll increase lift for only certain subsets of your customers. That's what you're monitoring. And a subtlety to this is you don't necessarily want to have the same customers in that control set at all times, because what that basically does is you have customers that you kind of excluded from all advanced marketing. That doesn't work. You need to make sure you have a consistently sized control group, but the individuals within that should not necessarily be the same over time. And like I said, you want to continuously evaluate how your marketing actions are affecting these customers and feed them back into your predictive models, because times change, people's tolerance for this change. A good example of that is when Gmail first came out and started anonymously scanning your email messages for marketing messages to the side of Gmail, really freaked people out. I think most people that use Gmail today don't really think much of it. And that's a big customer shift that's occurred over the last decade or 15 years. The third one is to incorporate imperfections. So be purposely imperfect. So one of the ways to do this is to obscure how much you know about a customer. A great way to do this is to actually do it through a service model. An example, if Target were to notice through its app that a customer was spending a lot of time in a certain area of the store, they might clandestinely send a Target team member to that part of the store to say, do you need help with something? It's not obvious that the reason they're sending them is because they know that the person has been standing there for a while, and they should not tell them that that's why they've come over, because that's kind of creepy. Like, we've been watching you and we think you might have a question, but just doing it is a positive customer interaction that uses this data in a way that serves the customer and most likely will not creep them out. The second tip for this is to expand your relationship. I think with personalization, a lot of marketers can actually do some damage where they're trying to put customers in these very small spheres. So this customer seems to only buy lighters from Amazon or something. And so you keep serving them these lighter ads for more and more lighters. And you realize that you've lost an opportunity to actually expand this relationship. So if you actually start putting in some products that, within reason, you think they might like, using lookalikes or something like that, you can actually get more personalization from them and say, hey, like you like lighters, why don't I give you some lighter fluid with that? Or why don't I give you the materials to make s'mores? And you might be building a campfire. You don't have the information already that knows that they might have a propensity to buy that, but you should test it out and see what happens. And finally, target in less obvious ways. Target has actually done this a lot with camouflaging the personalization. So after the big scandal that came out in the New York Times years ago with predicting someone was pregnant, they've actually started they still use that personalization, but what they do is when you get a Target flyer, maybe a third of it, maybe a half of it is actually personalized to you, and the rest of it is just general merchandise that they give to everyone. So instead of only serving you ads for pregnancy, they're going to serve you a page of ads for pregnancy, a page of ads for lawnmowers, and a page of ads for, I don't know, household food. And the pregnancy gets so lost in the mix of advertising that it's not as obvious that you have been targeted as pregnant. And finally, target with superior service. I mentioned this a little bit with the Target example, but you can also do this with loyalty programs. So if you have customers that you know are more likely to consume more or to become better customers over time, you might prioritize them in a customer service line without their knowledge. They don't know that the reason that they're getting to a customer service rep within 30 seconds as opposed to within 2 hours is because you know something about them. They just experience great service. That's a really way to serve the customer well without tipping your hand that you know so much about them. So those are the 4 things that I would recommend data marketers use now that they have more data on their hands in order to not only gauge where the line is for customers and what their tolerance is for personalization, but also to use this personalization in ways that serve the customer better, expand the relationship without freaking them out.